Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And the 2043 season is going very well for our Oakland A's. After a difficult finish to the month of June, we have a 8-1 record here in the early stages of the month of July. If you're following closely, you'll notice that we've moved forward a little over a week since our last episode to the first year player draft that begins today. The reason that happened is I had tried recording another episode where I played through the last week and also spoke about all of the players who are available to us in this draft. Unfortunately, that episode got corrupted, so have to redo the episode, so to speak. So I'll let you know up front. I am going to show you the key players who are available and appreciate any thoughts on what you would have done in this situation from the worldwide scouting department. But I'm actually going to be continuing with the draft in this episode simply because I've got today off. It is Monday, it is President's Day, and I'd like to do a few episodes, so I'm not going to put the draft out there for the worldwide scouting department to opine on, knowing that I'm not going to take any of your input. So just going to go with the draft here, but still appreciate your thoughts after I talk through the players on where I may have messed up in terms of my strategy. As we sit here on July 11th, we've extended our lead over the Angels in the division to 17 and a half games, and our 66-24 record is 7 games better than the Tigers in the American League Central. And the Tigers look to be a game and a half ahead of the Red Sox. The 3 best teams in baseball are in the American League, but we look well positioned to certainly win another AL West title and hopefully, when all is said and done, clinch home field advantage and the best record in baseball. Taking a look at the leaderboard, Luis Godina, 3rd in the league in hitting. Juan Pimentel and Juan Ramirez, 1-2 in ribbies. Bobby Armstrong continues to lead the league in steals. Godina, 3rd in OPS, and Pimentel, 2nd in batter WAR. Federico Ariola, who's led the AL in wins 2 straight years, while also winning the Cy Young Award and leading the league in ERA and WHIP both years. Leads the AL with 12 victories this season. And Joe Heilman, our closer, is 2nd in the American League with 27 saves as we close in on the All-Star game about a week and a half from now. But the focus today is the first-year player draft, and we've simmed ahead to our 31st pick, and we also have a supplemental pick, which will be the 37th overall from the departure this past offseason of Mike Gallick. So 2 of the next 7 picks for our Oakland Athletics. That being said, the big players and top prospects are off of the market at this point. That being said, still a lot of interesting players to look at that I will talk through with you now. The highest regarded pitching prospect, at least according to our scout, is Steve Dopey Webb, 17-year-old right-hander, potential 4-pitch arsenal, good stamina, high leadership and adaptability, and we think his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be well above average, or I guess that's a little bit of an exaggeration. They all could be above average. Webb is not projected to go until the 6th pick in the 4th round, even though he seems to be pretty highly regarded by the OSA as well. One similarity and one difference between recent drafts that we've seen. The similarity is in the mock draft, which we'll be talking about as we go through these players. Not a lot of pitchers still coming off the boards. When you get into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, a lot of times there's only 4 or 5 pitchers out of 30-plus players coming off the board, which is just not realistic. So when I see somebody like Steve Webb going in the 4th round, my hunch is that in the real draft, he's going to go somewhat earlier than he's going in the mock draft. So that is similar to what we've seen in recent drafts. The difference is that there's actually some pretty interesting pitchers out here available for us at the end of the first round, and I imagine some of them are going to be available for the next couple of rounds. So it does seem like at least the pool of pitching prospects is a bit deeper than it's been in recent drafts, which is positive. You can see there's a number of 3-star ceiling prospects that are also interesting. Starting in alphabetical order, Guadalupe Boring. Potential 3-pitch guy with above average stuff, average movement and control if he reaches his full potential, although he does have a lot of work to do with the control. Like his stamina, like his ability to hold on runners. Not somebody that I think we'd think about in the first round, but someone to certainly think about in the subsequent rounds. He does not go in the first 5 rounds of the mock draft. Either do any of the next several guys that we're going to talk about: Tim Bostic, Jim Bradley, Randy Peebles, and Joey Ryan. All do not go in the first 5 rounds of the mock draft. So that's a little interesting, given that they are pretty good-looking prospects. And as I said, even though they're not going in the mock draft, I think I'm going to have to, if I want some of these guys, take them in the second, third, and fourth rounds, because I don't really see them lasting until into the 6th round, which is where the mock draft that's very position player focused has them. Tim Bostic, potentially average stuff and movement, above average control, like the durability, solid stamina, good at holding on runners, but a 3-pitch arsenal in a best case scenario without some luck in the development lab certainly would bring him on board, but not a strong consideration in my mind for the first round. Closer Jim Bradley, between the 2-pitch arsenal and the severe lack of stamina, probably is a pure closer. Potentially outstanding stuff with that fastball and curveball combination. The movement and control, not special. Certainly not the type of profile I typically take in the first round. Randy Peebles, a lefty committed to San Diego. And Peebles is the proverbial little lefty, only 5'10", 155 pounds. I'll worry a little bit about that splitter as a third pitch. We don't think there's much of a ceiling at all with that pitch. Certainly possible that he could add another one in the development lab over the years. If everything works out, think that his stuff and his control could both be above average. But again, probably not someone I'd go in the first or second round. But a lot of these pitchers, if they're sitting around in the third and fourth round, to me start getting to be pretty interesting value. Joey Ryan, another guy who could have plus stuff and plus control, potential 4-pitch arsenal if all goes well, throws in the mid-90s. Mike Scheller is a guy who's projected to go in the third round, so he's viewed, at least by the mock draft, as one of the better pitching prospects. You can see he has a potentially very versatile arsenal of up to 6 pitches, good stamina, and we think his stuff, his movement, and his control could all be above average. Closer Joel Stroop is a guy who was not taken in the first 5 rounds in the mock draft. Does have 40 stamina, and he is durable. So if he were to add another pitcher, he's a guy who potentially could become a borderline starter. I think his stuff is going to be outstanding. Movement potentially a bit above average, and he's in a pretty good spot with 40 movement already for a 17-year-old. Key concern with him is that we expect his control to be below average, and he's got very bad control right now, so going to need to make some improvements there over the years. And then the final 2 pitchers that we're going to talk about are both guys that are pretty highly regarded in terms of the mock draft. Ricky Tobin is the one who goes first out of all of these pitchers. He's projected to go with the 17th pick in the second round. So if the mock draft is correct and we wanted Tobin, we would need to take him with this pick or our supplemental first rounder. And Tobin is one of the guys that I do prefer. 18-year-old, already throwing in the mid to high 90s, excellent stamina, good at holding on runners. We think his stuff could be well above average, average movement, slightly above average control, and a potential 5-pitch arsenal if everything works out, including an outstanding fastball and slider. So the 6'8" right-hander out of Brooklyn, New York, certainly an interesting prospect. And then the final player with a 3-star ceiling is Jimmy Urban. Urban is a player who's taken early in the 4th round in the mock draft. Potential 5-pitch arsenal, although we don't think any of those pitches are particularly outstanding. Does have excellent stamina. Not great at holding on runners. Throws in the low 90s, almost 19 years old. Does have high adaptability and work ethic. Think his stuff and his movement are both pretty average. Think the control could be above average. Positive is he does have a potential 5-pitch arsenal, but he's going to need to improve most or all of those pitches to just kind of have adequate stuff to be a major leaguer. So as I think about this crew, if there's anyone to think about in the 1st round, to me it is Ricky Tobin, simply because we don't think he'll be around with our 2nd pick. Also like Steve Webb, Mike Scheller. Those are probably my 2 other favorites. But with Scheller not going until the 3rd round and Webb not going until the 4th round, I think there's a reasonable chance you get a shot at one or both of them in the 2nd round. And there's also a pretty interesting crew of position players available, and not surprisingly, given that there's not a lot of pitchers going in the mock draft, but most, or actually all of these players come off the mock draft by the 3rd round, and some of them much earlier than that. So probably have to act early and often if we want to get 2 of these players. Left fielder Jimmy White. Really good left-handed contact hitting prospect. Everything else about him is pretty average. Slightly below average speed, slightly below average defensive outfielder. He's projected to go with a 1st-round supplemental pick, 36th overall, so right before our 2nd pick in the 1st round. He's a solid prospect, but probably someone we're not going to focus on. Center fielder Mike Solik, a somewhat similar profile to White, but more extreme. Even better as a contact hitter, but even less home run power. Outfield range and speed a little bit higher. And apologies that it seems like I'm choking to death here. Just have a persistent cough that I can't get rid of, so pausing frequently so you don't have to listen to me. Solik is projected to go in the middle of the 3rd round, so he's expected to be on the board round and a half longer than Mr. White. Not in love with either of them, but certainly don't see myself pursuing White or Solik until potentially the 3rd round. With our 31st overall pick, we are projected by the mock draft to take center fielder Howie Schmock. Looks like he's a bit above average in all of the batting categories if he reaches his full potential. Home run power is a particular, potentially positive trait for him. Like the durability, average speed, average defensively. Switch hitter is committed to William and Mary, but if we're going to lock Schmock up, probably need to do it relatively soon. Another player who, interestingly, we are projected to take is Howie Pace, projected to go to us with our 2nd round pick. Similar profile to Schmock in that he's slightly above average or average in all of the major batting categories, so his eye and his power a little bit worse. Better contact, also a switch hitter. Not very good in terms of his speed. Does have a 3rd baseman's defensive profile. Don't like some of the negative personality traits. but certainly as we get later into the second round, Schmock might be, Pace might be someone to think about. Juan Espinal projected to go early in the third round. Potentially interesting home run power from the right fielder. Another player, similar profile to others we have in this draft, kind of below average speed, below average outfield skills. Does have high adaptability and work ethic. The left-handed hitter committed to Sam Houston State. And the final two players are both expected to go very early, according to the mock draft. Shortstop Dave Boyd out of South Portland, Maine, was projected to go 22nd overall in the mock draft. So if we're going to want to get him, probably need to strike relatively soon. I think his contact and his home run power could both be above average. A solid potential defensive player, probably more of a third baseman's profile than a shortstop profile when all is said and done. Like the work ethic, don't love the low loyalty, but it's not a critical determining factor. And kind of average speed and base running instincts when all is said and done. So an interesting prospect in Boyd, as I noted, was the most highly regarded player in the mock draft of anyone who's on the board for us here at pick number 31. And last, but certainly not least, is the shortstop Dante Threats, the highest ceiling of any of the players who are still available here in the draft, according to our scout. Like the high adaptability and work ethic, average speed, but a potentially outstanding defensive player, which we like. And that's coupled with contact that we think could be well above average, slightly above average home run power, average gap power, and a slightly below average eye. Threats, the right-handed hitter out of Los Angeles, committed to Morehead State University. I believe that's where Phil Simms played quarterback close to 50 years ago at this point. Think that Threats is a real interesting prospect. We are projected to take him with our supplemental first-round pick, so we're projected to take him 6 or 7 picks from now, whenever we're back on the board. So certainly, according to the mock draft, Threats, Boyd, and White, as well as Schmock, are the most likely to come off the board very soon. White, as I mentioned, not all that interested in him here with the first round, even though he's projected to go before our next pick. Howie Schmock, do like the durability and the well-balanced bat, but pretty generic corner outfielder profile when all is said and done. Boyd, love the good contact and good power. And as we talked about, he is the player who was ranked the highest, at least in the mock drafts, where he went 22nd overall. Like the glove, but don't love it. And that's why Dante Threats is ultimately my favorite among these players. Speed is only average-ish, but that still is pretty competitive relative to the opportunity set here. Clearly the best defensive player available. Good personality with a high adaptability and work ethic. And even if the power is only major league average and he's kind of average in gap power, home run power, and eye, still a potentially excellent contact hitter with solid speed and great defense. To me, is a pretty interesting player to consider with our first round pick. And going back to the pitchers who are available, mention that probably the ones I like the best are Steve Webb, who's projected to go in the 4th round. Mike Scheller, with that very versatile arsenal, who's projected to go in the 3rd round. And then Ricky Tobin, who's projected to go with the 17th pick in the 2nd round. Really like an 18-year-old that throws in the mid to high 90s already with a potential 5-pitch arsenal. So I think right now my plan is to hope that Tobin lasts until pick number 37. As I mentioned, he's not expected to go until the 17th pick of the second round with the Padres. Could take Tobin now, but if I want to get the position player that I like and the pitcher that I like the most, given that Mr. Tobin's not projected to go until the 17th pick in the second round, while Mr. Threats is projected to go with our supplemental pick just a few picks from now, I think it makes more sense to pick Dante Threats right now with our first round pick, and then hope that Mr. Tobin is still around with our supplemental pick. Scouting director does recommend Threats right now, and we little harder for us to sign. He says his demand is just $1.8 million, but he ultimately is going to want recommended slot with us. But we are going to bring Mr. Threats on board with our first pick. Again, if anyone from the worldwide scouting department would have gone in a different direction, always helpful to hear that type of feedback. But we're going to go with Threats here with our first pick and hope that the starting pitching prospect Tobin sits around and lasts for the next several picks to our supplemental. So we're going to meet Threats' demand, continue auto drafting. Espinal, Pace, Schmock, Solik, and Jimmy White are still available. So what that means is that the other shortstop, Boyd, has gone off in these past few picks. We'll see exactly where he went. If I could click properly on the draft log. And Boyd ended up going to the Rangers with the third supplemental pick. As you can see, the only pitcher who's come off the board is Angelo Verona, 17-year-old high schooler who was not as highly regarded by our scout, at least in terms of his ceiling. Looks similar-ish to a lot of pitchers that we've talked about, so certainly a guy who we could have considered in the second or third round. But Boyd is really the only guy that we've talked about previously who's come off the board. And with that, I tend to think maybe one or two of these players will still be around for our second round pick, given that I do like Ricky Tobin best among the pitchers, and he's expected to be gone before our next pick. That's the direction we're going to go. Scout recommends Howie Schmock, who you'll remember was mocked to us with the pick that we made on Threats. But we are going to go with Ricky Tobin here, draft the young starting pitcher. So really like the first round that we've ended up with an excellent infield prospect in Dante Threats, as well as a really interesting high school pitching prospect in Ricky Tobin. Those of you who are wondering, really nothing in terms of college players that are interesting available. I did go in detail in the episode that was lost for eternity into some of the more highly regarded college players out there, but there's just no one who is by any stretch worthwhile in my mind of a first or second round pick. Kind of 2-star ceiling guys, except for a couple of relievers. So nothing all that interesting there. So didn't want to waste your time going into more detail there. But we will submit a slot offer to Tobin as well. And let's hope that we've got some interesting players that we have talked about available when we are up again in the second round. And pitching-wise, a lot of the pitchers are actually still there. Scheller, unfortunately, who we liked, is gone. But Jimmy Urban and Steve Webb, who were both projected to go into the fourth round, are still around. I do think it was good that we took Tobin, who was projected to go 17th overall in the second round with that supplemental pick. Because as we talked about, Scheller was not projected to go in the mock draft until the third round, and he ended up going earlier as well. And here at the end of the second round, some interesting players still around. As we talked about, Howie Pace is the guy who was mocked to us with this pick here, number 34 in the second round. Don't love some of his personality traits, but certainly a potentially interesting switch-hitting third baseman. Juan Espinal, like the home run power, pretty average profile otherwise. Do like the high adaptability and work ethic, though. Espinal projected to go early in the third round. And then Mike Solak, also projected to go early in the third round. We talked about him. He had a pretty similar profile to the left fielder, Mr. White. Better contact, less power, a little better range and speed. So 3 interesting players on the board here, 2 left-handed batters and the switch-hitting third baseman, Mr. Pace. And our scouting director does recommend Espinal, the right fielder that we talked about with the good home run power. As you can see, I am back on the pitchers page, though, and I'm certainly intrigued here in the second round by Steve Webb. If we were to take a pitcher, not surprisingly, that would be who our scout recommends. I do like the potential for 4 above average pitches, although none are outstanding. Good stamina, some positive personality traits with a high leadership and adaptability, and we think he can be above average at everything. As I mentioned, not projected to go until early in the fourth round in the mock draft, but I have found those mock drafts and the fact that they just are not picking pitchers in them to be somewhat unrealistic. So my hunch is that if we want Webb, might be prudent to take him now rather than waiting till the end of the third round when we're just a few picks ahead of where he's expected to go in the mock draft. There are definitely some other interesting pitching prospects available, though. So my hunch is that an Urban, a Bostic, a Boring, some of the guys that we would certainly consider, some of them will be available in the third round if we decide to go with a hitter. But I'm just not in love with Solak, Pace, or Espinal. I don't know that any of them make them to the third round, but I like Steve Webb better than either of them. So we're going to go ahead and bring Dopey Webb on board. My hunch is there will definitely be a starting pitcher or 2 that we're interested in available in the third round. Question is whether any of the 3 most highly regarded batters are still going to be available. And they are, so I like the way that turned out. Espinal, Pace, and Solak all still available. Taking a look at the pitchers, and among guys who could be starters, Ryan, Peebles, Bostic, and Boring all still around. And as we talked about, none of them were projected to go in the first 5 rounds of the draft. So we might be able to push the envelope a little bit and hope that at least one of them lasts till next round. And among the 3 position players, Espinal is still who our scout is recommending. Howie Pace, some of the negative personality traits, the low speed, the horrible bunting, kind of turned me off from him. If the batting profile and the glove were more exceptional, I'd certainly be willing to make an exception for some of the negative personality traits, but just not the type of guy that I'm going to often use a third round pick on. I do like the outstanding contact potential of Mike Solak. Not a lot of home run power, but think that he could be a pretty interesting contact hitter. Juan Espinal, though, has that combination of above average contact and well above average home run power if he reaches his full potential. Also does have the high adaptability and work ethic, but to be fair, he's not the brightest bulb on the tree. Not great speed, not great defensively, a little older for a high schooler at 19 years old. So I'm not in love with any of these guys, but I think just from a value standpoint, it probably is going to make sense to take a position player. But before I do that, I'm going to spend a little more time offline with some of the 3-star potential guys who are still out there. Just make sure that there's not someone more interesting that I'm missing out on. And there actually are some pretty interesting batting prospects still available. And as I think back to the episode that disappeared off the face of the earth, the one college player that I was intrigued by was Rick-Elvis Harrison, 21-year-old out of CSUN. I'm assuming that's Cal State University Northridge. Really interesting glove, and the bat, albeit not exceptional as a college player, is pretty far along. Also has good durability, high intelligence. The speed, certainly not exceptional, but he is or was the most interesting college player that I saw in the pool. So someone that definitely considering right now and will keep an eye on going forward. And I think my hunch is that a few of these players will still be around in the 4th round. So we're actually going to go with the college player, Whistler Harrison. Certainly not the ceiling that we think we've got with some of the other players that we've looked at. But obviously his floor is pretty high at this point. Like the durability, really like the glove, and think that he's someone who could potentially help us in the not too distant future. So here in the 3rd round, we'll go with Rick-Elvis Harrison. Moving on to our 4th round pick. And Howie Pace is still out there. That negative personality seems to be turning off some other teams. Pitcher-wise, Bradley, Peebles, Ryan, and Stroop all still out there, although we're not necessarily in love with any of them. And we're going a bit crazy with the shortstops here. Going to take a 3rd shortstop in the first 4 rounds here. Dan Hubbard. May end up being more of a third base type, or even a potentially outstanding first baseman if the bat developed enough to play him at that position. Really like the speed, love the high adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence. Interesting glove, and we think that he could be average to above average in everything offensively, with well above average contact and slightly above average home run power. For a 4th round pick, think that Hubbard is a pretty interesting choice, so we're going to go ahead and bring him on board. Keep going, and Howie Pace remains. Nobody wants to touch that somewhat negative personality. And as interesting as Pace, a guy who was projected to go to us at the end of the 2nd round, should be at the end of the 5th round. Not the direction we're going to go. We're going to go with the center fielder, Chris Conkling. Potentially really good contact, above average gap power, good speed, solid range in the outfield. The only thing he lacks is home run power, but think that potential combination of above average contact, gap power, and eye with good speed could hopefully counteract his lack of ability to hit the ball 350, 400 feet in the air on a regular basis. Think that he's also an interesting defensive outfield prospect, and we're going to go with Conkling here in the 5th round. And we're likely to finish up most of the draft offline at this point, but we'll see if Howie's still available in the 6th round and then check back in on some of those pitchers as well. Howie Pace is still available in the 6th round. I do like some of these other guys, so I'm not sure that we're going to go there, but we'll check in on the pitchers as well. The only one left at this point is the closer, Jim Bradley. We talked about him earlier. This is a guy with potentially outstanding stuff. The movement and the control could both be an issue. Don't think he's interesting enough with the 2 big pitchers that we've already taken to go for him now. And at this point, I think we do go with Howie Pace, the guy who we projected to pick in the mock draft in the 2nd round, lasting to us till the end of the 6th round. Certainly has some negative personality traits. But the 2 that I tend to care about the least are the financial ambition and the loyalty, which are 2 of the 3 that he has. Don't love the low leadership, but at least when we think about things like work ethic, adaptability, and intelligence, he's average. And I think we're going to have enough strong personalities in any locker room that he's in, given the way that we tend to draft high leadership players with good personalities, that hopefully he doesn't cause too many problems. Do think that he's got that traditional third baseman's profile, and he is a guy who we think could be an above average offensive player as a switch hitter when all is said and done. 700,000 is certainly going to be above slot for the 6th round, because shouldn't be really paying anything special for players at this point in the draft, but we've got plenty of money to spend. So we're going to finally go ahead and go with Howie Pace. Interestingly, that's not who our scout recommends. He recommends Randy Daniels, a starting pitching prospect with a very unimpressive potential arsenal. So Pace finally will come to us more than 4 rounds after he was expected, or exactly 4 rounds after he was expected to join us, according to the experts. And in the 7th round, the closer Jim Bradley still available. You can't teach the kind of stuff that he potentially has, so as a 7th round flyer, I think he's a pretty interesting player to bring on board. And the draft is now complete. Added one other guy that was over slot in the 8th round, catching prospect Wyatt Phillips. Looks like a pretty interesting potential bat, like the durability. The glove is nothing special, and certainly a mixed personality with high leadership and intelligence, high financial ambition, and low adaptability. But think as an 8th round flyer, certainly worth bringing on board. So like the way things worked out with Threats and Tobin in the 1st round, a really high-end starting pitching prospect in Webb in the 2nd round, the college player Harrison, and then some high schoolers with Hubbard, Conkling, Pace, and Phillips over some of the mid-round picks that we had. If you would have gone in a different direction, definitely let me know. Always interesting to hear the perspective of the Worldwide Scouting Department. And before we finish up the episode, as we think about the players who are on the trade block here on July 11th, not a huge difference in terms of the pitchers. Alejandro Espinoza and Jorge Bernal, the 2 most highly regarded starting pitchers who are available. Position player-wise, if we were looking for help with the bat or in the infield, some familiar names available. Our old buddy Brady Harris from many years ago, Sergio Palomares and Byron Brain. Amari Flagger, 3rd baseman with an outstanding glove. Just don't know that bat really does much for us if we're potentially looking to upgrade in our middle infield from Palomares and Swenson. Kind of similar with Luis Moreno. The glove not even as good. Fragile physically, a 30-year-old making almost $19 million. And although he's been a close to league average offensive player in recent years, don't view him as a true difference maker. And honestly feel the same about Juan Hurtado. Outstanding contact, great speed, but he's 35 years old. He's wrecked physically. Did win a batting title a year ago with St. Louis. Led the league in steals the year before that. So a very accomplished offensive player. But with the fact that we've got Selvey in left, Armstrong in center, Uresti in right, and the youngster Ramirez locked in at DH, I just don't know that paying a lot to bring on Hurtado in the final year of his contract really is going to move the needle all that much for us, particularly because for a rental of a 35-year-old who's wrecked physically and making a lot of money, we'd have to give up one of the top players in our organization just to rent him. So don't think that makes a lot of sense, but we've still got almost 3 weeks until the trade deadline, so we're going to continue monitoring things in our next episode. If you have any thoughts on what we should do in the trade market or what we should have potentially done in the draft, always helpful to hear them. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.